1910s Vladimir Lenin. Russia after founding the Bolshevik faction of the Marxist-Russian Social Democratic Party. Lenin was instrumental in overthrowing Russia's provisional government during the 1917 October Revolution. As leader of the first constitutionally socialist state, Lenin put in place numerous political and economic reforms that forever changed the Russian Socialist Federative Soviet Republic. Though considered a dictator, the former premier of the Soviet Union left a lasting impact on communism and history. The 1920s, Mahatma Gandhi. India. Gandhi observed much racial discrimination while working as a lawyer in South Africa. This inspired him to lead his fellow Indians in non-violent campaigns and protests to improve their rights and freedoms when he was the head of the Indian National Congress in the early 1920s. While it took several decades, India's independence from Britain was eventually achieved due to Gandhi's efforts and determination. The 1930s, Adolf Hitler, Germany. Following the Nazis' failed 1923 coup attempt, Hitler got another chance to spread his German nationalism, as well as his anti-capitalist, anti-communist, and anti-Semitic views. He was named Chancellor of Germany's coalition government in 1933 as leader of the Third Reich. The dictator ruled over a totalitarian state and established concentration camps for the opposition. He then triggered World War II when Germany and the Soviet Union invaded Poland in 1939. The 1940s. Winston Churchill, the United Kingdom. While he made some questionable World War I decisions, the British Bulldog redeemed himself during the Second World War with his invaluable leadership skills. As Prime Minister, Churchill motivated the British people to keep fighting the Nazis. It was thanks to his willpower and his formation of the Grand Alliance with United States President Franklin Delano Roosevelt and the Soviet Union's Joseph Stalin that the war was finally brought to an end. What kind of people do they think we are? Is it possible they do not realize that we shall never cease to persevere against them until they have been taught a lesson that they and the world will never forget? The 1950s, Kim Il-sung. North Korea. Kim had only been North Korea's premier for a few years when the first statues of him appeared. In 1950, the great leader led the invasion of South Korea, which resulted in over 1 million deaths in 3 years, while he tried to help North Korea's economy. The communist leader also established a strong military presence, prison camps, and the use of executions during his rule. His autocratic government helped pave the way for his future presidency. The 1960s, Fidel Castro, Cuba, with Castro as prime minister. The 1960s saw Cuba become a socialist state and build ties with the Soviet Union. After the American-funded Bay of Pigs invasion failed, Castro strengthened his Marxist-Leninist beliefs and communist policies, which spurred the next year's Cuban Missile Crisis. Despite his regime's repression of the opposition, anti-imperialism, and revolutionary action, Castro also helped increase Cuba's global influence. Cuban fighters will be able to count the revolutionary movement in any corner of the earth. The 1970s, Mao Zedong, China. As the founder of the People's Republic of China, Chairman Mao planned to modernize his one-party socialist state and nationalize its industries. Through the Great Leap Forward, when that failed, he launched the Cultural Revolution, hoping to reinforce his power, spread communism, and remove dissidents. While his health deteriorated in the 1970s, the period marked the transition between Mao's China and the China of today, which continues to experience massive economic growth. The 1980s, Ruhollah Khomeini, Iran. After leading the coup d'etat against Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi during the Iranian Revolution, Ayatollah Khomeini became Iran's supreme leader. Political and religious power was so great that Iraq invaded the country, hoping to prevent his Islamic revolution. Later that decade, Khomeini ensured his leadership was secure by executing thousands of political prisoners. He further championed the Islamic cause by requesting Salman Rushdie's death after Muslims accused the author of blasphemy. Following 27 years in jail for his anti-apartheid views, Mandela was finally released in 1990. As South Africans, this is the time for us to speak of what is best for the future of our country. He then helped end apartheid in South Africa as president of the African National Congress, and, thanks to the country's first democratic and multiracial elections, he eventually became the first black South African president, while he focused on rebuilding the economy, uniting citizens, and investigating human rights abuses. He also brought his country onto the world stage. Never and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience oppression. Off one by another, the 2000s, George W. Bush, the United States of America, following in his father's footsteps. W. became the 43rd President of the United States. The former Texas governor concentrated on tax cuts, socially conservative initiatives, and education reform. But it was 9/11 and his global war on terrorism that really marked his presidency. The United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts. Despite this controversial move, Bush was elected for a second term and was put to the test with events like Hurricane Katrina and a lengthy recession. Do you agree with our list? Who do you think are the most influential political leaders of the last century?